Hey all, here are OS Reviews. A while back, we checked out a pair of active noise-canceling wireless headphones from One More called the Sono Flow. I think it offered pretty solid value for around $100 compared to other brands like Bose's Quiet Comfort, for example. It's more affordable and delivers good enough ANC as well as audio performance with high-res audio certification as well. Well, today we're taking a look at their newly updated Sono Flow Pro. This one sells for $20 more, but both models are now discounted on their site, so you can find the Pro for around $88 versus the non-Pro around $66. So what are you getting for slightly more? Well, for one, it's going to be longer battery life. The Pro model can last upwards of 100 hours in the wireless Bluetooth mode with ANC off. With ANC or noise canceling on, it's going to last 65 hours, which is actually quite competitive. In fact, these are some of the highest numbers I've seen for continuous music listening, delivering excellent battery life. Compared to the regular version, could last around 70 hours with ANC off, around 50 hours with ANC turned on. So you get even longer battery endurance now if you're going on to international flights, for example, or going for longer road trips maybe, and you're further away from a power outlet, you don't have to charge it quite as often. It still has fast charging as well, so just a 5-minute top-up can supply up to 10 hours of additional listening time. It's kind of ridiculous. Now in terms of protocols, it's using a Bluetooth 5.4 chip, which is going to be a little bit more energy efficient, slightly stronger connectivity compared to Bluetooth 5.0 that was used on the previous regular version. And then last but not least, the effectiveness of the active noise cancellation has also been slightly improved. It now cancels up to 42 decibels of sound, which claims to be a 12% improvement versus the original Sono Flows, while still offering an audio transparency or ambient mode that uses the microphones to let in sound so you can have a conversation or hear someone approaching you, kind of the opposite of ANC, without removing the headphones. So whereas the previous generation model, I would have ranked it maybe around 7.5 out of 10 for ANC strength, these are closer to an 8 or 8.5. That being said, the overall design in terms of the aesthetics, material is still very similar as the original Sono Flow, as well as still using the same 40mm drivers as well. So sound quality hasn't really changed, but as the saying goes, why fix what's not broken? This is more of an incremental upgrade anyways, with audio quality already being good enough, I would say, for this price point. And just like previously, these are still high-res audio certified. You can use them as wired headphones in addition to Bluetooth with wireless LDAC audio codec that can supposedly transmit up to 3 times more data compared to regular SBC and AAC Bluetooth. You can enable the LDAC codec using their companion app, which is available for both iOS and Android devices, compared to the regular listening mode, which might be better for watching videos and doing a bit of gaming. Now, speaking of the active noise cancellation, I guess one other subtle improvement compared to before is that these now have the ability to turn ANC on even if you're using them as wired headphones. The toggle here still functions. Compared to on the original Sono Flows, you could only activate active noise cancellation when you have Bluetooth turned on. In other words, if you're using the 3.5mm headphone jack, if you're on a plane, for instance, this is going to be a bit more versatile, giving you the ability to still turn on ANC, regardless of if you're using it in the wired or wireless modes. And One More continues to partner with this Grammy Award winner for tuning some of their drivers that we saw also on the original Sono Flows. And then obviously if you're using them as wired headphones, you don't have to necessarily even charge them up. It just works as kind of a pass-through pair of traditional headphones, simply plug and play without any battery constraints. So the 100 hours there is just for the wireless Bluetooth mode. Plus, it looks like there are coupon codes available that can bring down the cost even more. This is a brand that a few years ago actually partnered with Xiaomi, the smartphone manufacturer, to create some pretty solid kind of in-ear style piston buds, and they delivered, again, excellent value. So they once had some of those Xiaomi ecosystem ties, but it's great to see them continue to branch out and improve on their portfolio with pretty solid sound, all things considered. Now, taking a closer look at the packaging here, so instead of the box, we just have some of the same features reiterated again on the rear. These weigh in at 246 grams, relatively comfortable for traveling with. The app also contains 12 different EQs that you're able to switch back and forth between for things like bass boosted as well as treble boosted, so on and so forth. We have just a quick user manual on the inside, and then it also comes with an included hard carrying case, which is actually a pretty nice extra. Not every single brand gives you these days, and otherwise it has a nice fabric material. There's kind of a lanyard hook, as well as the zipper here also having the One More logo. Now what's kind of interesting though is compared to the original Sono Flows, it looks like they've shifted the hinge from opening on the right side to now moving it to the left side. So they've gone from right-handed to left-handed. The quite similar. That being said, once we open them up, I guess one other slight difference is the Pro's case, interestingly enough, no longer has a slight zipper compartment that we saw on the original Sonoflows, which might have been one detail that got cut to keep the costs down. So previously there was a little net that could keep the Type-C cable there more snugly in place, compared to a slightly more simplified case design on the Pros, but just a minor quirk. You still have access to included Type-C cable, pretty standard stuff, and then just the headphones themselves. Which, speaking of, comes in the blue version we see here, kind of a darker blue shade, as well as a more classic black and white variants can all be picked between. Again, they are completely collapsible for easier transit, so they can fold down and then just pop them back out again when you're ready to wear them. And a closer look at the design, I still think it's relatively stylish with some glossy accents, as well as the One More logo embedded onto the very top, which is crafted out of a soft memory foam plush synthetic leather texture that actually is pretty well padded for, again, a headphone in this price range. Left and right side cushions are also going to be labeled, giving you sufficient flexibility when it comes to movement, as well as the headband here obviously can be extended depending on head size and comfort, and it is crafted out of metal on this part for the moving parts, adding a little bit more to the durability. Now on the side here is where you can find the volume controls, as well as the dedicated button for turning ANC on or off. You'll also find on the very bottom here some red accents for the 3.5mm headphone jack, as well as the Type-C port there for charging, and then just a power key on the other side. Now one thing I will say though is, just like on the originals, you don't really have any IP or Ingress rating protection on these, unlike some smaller true wireless style buds. I wouldn't be too concerned unless they drop into a pool, for example, but that's pretty much the norm on these larger style headphones in general. It's an area where smaller buds, interestingly, seem to have a tighter Ingress rating. Now here they are next to the original Sonoflows, side by side. This is the black version, which has a slightly more dramatic kind of red color for the cushions on the inside, but again, not too different in terms of overall fit and finish, as well as dimensions are all very similar, maybe missing just the chrome accent here on the headband. As you can tell, they're a little bit shinier on the Pro model, but everything else is all going to be quite comparable side by side, including the placement of the buttons and controls are all mostly going to be reused when it comes to the shell design, just to keep some of those costs a little bit lower. But yeah, even though it's a familiar design, I would say that they've done a good job in terms of the overall build, although predominantly crafted out of this polycarbonate plastic still feels good enough, not too flimsy while remaining relatively lightweight and comfortable in my testing for a couple of hours of audio listening. I didn't encounter too much fatigue thanks to the padding here, which I thought was pretty good. Plus the fact that you get some natural noise isolation because of this larger cushion, in addition to the digital active noise cancellation, so the effectiveness there should be a little bit better versus a smaller pair of buds. There's also some subtle sound effects or chimes whenever the headphones are turned on or off, so it's not too distracting in terms of the audio prompts either. As you can hear there, it's actually quite satisfying, kind of like a ringtone from a Nokia device back in the 2000s. As for connectivity, just going over to Bluetooth settings on your device, you're able to pair with the headphones, which are interestingly labeled as the HQ51 instead of being called the Sonoflow Pros, which might be a little bit confusing at first, but you just tap on this instead to connect. Now under settings here, what you'll see is there's actually not a toggle for turning on LDAC directly. You have to download their companion app if you want to control that, plus the 12 built-in EQ controls. Afterward, it'll ask you to select the color of the headphones. Looks like there's a few other shades in other markets like brown, but I'm going to tap on just the blue version here. As well as under sound effects, this is where you can go over to the custom EQs versus bass reduce, bass boost, acoustic, hip hop, electronic, vocal, pop can also be adjusted. So it is functional and does make a subtle difference on the sound. And for custom EQ, you have a frequency slider that you can adjust yourself if you want that granular level of control. Although there isn't a hearing test or kind of hear ID mode, which automatically does this for you, creating your own personalized EQ might have been an interesting software feature that I think we saw in some of the other pairs of more pro-grade true wireless buds previously, so it's not currently found on their larger headphones, at least in the current software state. The app also allows you to turn ANC on-off or go into an audio transparency mode directly from this toggle here as well, and for shortcuts, this is where we can trigger the LDAC functionality on, or a low latency gaming mode can also be found, plus a spatial audio mode, which actually wasn't even advertised on their product page. However, this is not exactly the same thing as head tracking like on the AirPods Max, for example, which has a built-in gyroscope and accelerometer. Instead, the head tracking is more like Dolby Atmos. It's similar to another EQ that makes the trebles a bit more enhanced, makes the sound a bit more airy and slightly more dimensional, but still fun to play with, I guess. Better than nothing. If you are watching movies, it might be a mode that you can turn on. And there's also a smart burn-in function as well, which will play back a series of frequency sounds. So it's based on kind of an audiophile theory that speakers, when it's first taken out of the factory, needs to play back sounds for X hours to kind of loosen up and get to their optimal state. So if you subscribe to that theory, you can activate this function and have it kind of run overnight before you start listening to music, and might slightly improve the sonic performance as well. It's a nice extra function built into the app. And there's also dual device connection capability as well under advanced system settings, allowing you to pair to 2 devices simultaneously, like a phone or a computer, and it will switch back and forth between both connected devices based on whatever one is playing back audio automatically. But regardless, connecting to the phone via Bluetooth, at least in regular device settings, is still very stable. Or it's just the app part, which could use maybe a little bit more refinement, although basic functionality is already present. Now moving into the aforementioned sound quality and performance section, again, since the drivers and tuning hasn't really changed compared to the original Sono Flow, you won't find a drastic difference here, but I still found the listening experience to be quite comfortable, offering sufficient bass when you're listening to pop music or EDM tracks, especially if you fiddle around with the bass boosted settings. It actually can be quite thumpy. However, it doesn't really overpower the mids and trebles, which are also quite clean. Didn't really hear any traces of hissing or any distortion in the background either. Also, if you're using them as wired headphones, didn't have any interference sounds from the ports, while still delivering sufficient volume as well for you to enjoy the tracks if you wanted to jam out and have a party for one. Also, the ANC's effectiveness, as we alluded to earlier, has been slightly improved versus the original Sono Flows, a little weaker compared to the best ANC headphones from the aforementioned Boses and Sonys of the world, but those are also 2 or 3 times more expensive. Whereas on these, they have now gone up to maybe 8 out of 10, getting a little bit closer. These are still best at repressing lower frequency sounds like engines, fan noises, but again, having the flexibility of activating ANC, even if you're using them as wired headphones, is perhaps a more meaningful and helpful new addition if you're using them on a flight, for example, and relying on the in-flight entertainment system. It was quite easy to get immersed into the sound, with the default sound signature already being quite good for the majority of genres, but you can always, again, fiddle around with some of those EQs for a more personalized experience. And now here's a quick demo of what the microphones sound like, bringing the headphones closer to my mouth, test 1 2 3, how do I sound, and playing back the current recording. Demo of what the microphones sound like, bringing the headphones closer to my mouth, test 1 2 3, how do I sound. So overall, I would say not bad. Definitely is going to be legible enough in terms of picking up your voice, even if there's a little bit of ambient wind around you, if you are in a pinch or having a Zoom call or meeting on your computer. So there we have it. That's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Sono Flow Pros. If you don't currently have the original Sono Flows, I think it is worth spending a little bit extra for this model, just because you get a newer Bluetooth chip, which is even more reliable, longer battery life, again up to 100 hours wireless, which is kind of crazy, or of course infinite battery life if you're using them as wired headphones. They don't require any battery there to operate, plus offering slightly higher cancellation capabilities by around 12% versus the original model. These are still very comfortable and offering satisfying sound using the 40mm drivers that they have tuned, plus EQ controls available in the app. And again, one more I would say is similar to Amazfit in the smartwatch wearable space. Both have previously been ecosystem brands of Xiaomi, which is kind of a testament to their quality. They've been around for a long time. It's not just a generic brand, with a slightly higher emphasis on design and fit and finish. So I think it's still an excellent value, all things considered, especially since you can now find this at some pretty aggressive discounts as well. So just a little bit more of a polished upgrade. Now, of course, if you have the original Sono Flows, it probably isn't enough to justify getting a brand new pair of these, unless you're looking to get a second one as backup, maybe holding off for the Generation 2. This is more like an in-between step, so borrowing the similar shell and design from afar. That said, I still think it's a pretty impressive showing as a pair of affordable ANC wireless Bluetooth headphones. You can check out more details if you are interested in the links down below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Sono Flow Pros from One More.